Hey everyone, Dev with Crime Hive, and in this true crime video, we're talking about 10 facts in the Elisa Lam mystery at the Cecil Hotel. Now, if you didn't know, there was a Netflix documentary recently about this case. Very interesting. If you haven't seen that, I would suggest watching that. If you have seen that, we're going to talk about those facts. And if you don't want to hear these facts, because this will be a spoiler alert if you're planning on watching that. But if you're curious to learn these facts, definitely stay tuned here. Again, Dev with Crime Hive. Subscribe if you haven't already, and just hit the bell notification for other updates. This video is a little bit different than some of my other ones, but let's talk about the 10 facts related to this case. So here she is right here, just a little context before we do. 21 years old, from Canada. She goes to visit Los Angeles, well, really the Pacific coast, and she was in San Diego. She goes up into Los Angeles, and she ends up staying at the Cecil Hotel. Okay, so this is what it looks like here. Very notorious hotel. We've learned quite a bit about it. You learn through some of the story in the Netflix documentary, and a lot of death, a lot of bad things have happened throughout the years. It's a very old hotel, and we'll talk about some of those things here. One of the facts that I want to point out, as we'll get in right now. First off, she went missing January 31st, 2013. Okay, so it's a little older case. She was discovered 19 days later on February 19th, and she was found dead. And we'll talk about those details there. So as we get into fact one, Skid Row. Okay, so fact one here, Skid Row, right near the Cecil Hotel, and it's considered one of the most dangerous areas of the U.S. So just to show you, Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles, not too far away from the hotel. If you're looking here, it's about a 3-minute drive. If you're looking right here on this map here, an 11-minute walk. It's just right in that area. So this is the area that we're talking about. It's just a very notorious area by itself. You learn some history about that as well, with how the homeless population got as bad as it did. A pretty sad and tragic story by itself. But this is the area that we're talking about with this case. So let's talk about fact number two. Okay, so fact number two, I've got a picture here of Richard Ramirez here, and he's considered the Night Stalker, and there was an interesting Netflix documentary about that as well recently. And if you haven't seen that, you can definitely check it out. I mentioned some facts in another video about him and in that case, but definitely take a look at that. He actually stayed at the hotel often, and he had stayed at the top. The top rooms here, the top floor, and apparently stayed there for quite some time and was quite comfortable in that hotel. So if that means anything to you, just to give an idea of what's going on there and the type of people that are staying in that hotel, you've got all calibers of life, including Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, one of the most notorious serial killers out there. Quite a bizarre man, quite some bizarre crimes that he committed. And after those crimes, it's suggested that he came right back to the hotel, perhaps all bloody, changing his clothing and walking back into the hotel. So really, really interesting there to know that. Okay, so fact three, the elevator door that was shown here was left open, we learned, because she pressed the hold door button, which stays open for approximately 2 minutes before it closes. If you don't know the video I'm talking about, I'm going to show that clip here. It's a very notorious clip. It's been online circulating for years, but it shows Elisa here, and we'll just play this here from this video here. Keep in mind, I'm going to pause it real quick. Just keep in mind, this is coming from another video. They may not allow me to show this. It may get shut down. So if it goes from me telling you to see this video to all of a sudden I'm talking again, just know you can find this online. If you typed in just Elisa Lam in the elevator video, it'll pop up all over. So let's take a look here just so you guys have some context. So the elevator door opens up. She steps in. You can see her pressing quite a few buttons. Okay. Pretty interesting. She's looking around, thinking somebody might be after her. She's hiding. It appears she's hiding from someone. Pretty spooky video. A lot of people have posted this. Okay, I'll show just a little bit more here. She's very cautious. You can see, watch her movements though, her body language. Really pay attention to that. That's really important in this case. Okay, and then she's kind of just hanging out here. I want to show one last part with her arm gestures that she makes, that you'll see her make right over here in the video. And this is the full video here, so let's see if it... Oh, and then so she comes back in. Let's just go back to this. So you can tell she's going through something in her, in her mind. There's definitely some anxiety. You can see by the way she's acting. She continues to press these buttons. Okay, she walks out again. And watch her arms here. Watch her hand movement. Her hand movements there. Okay, and that's going to be really important when we talk about some of these other facts here. So you can certainly watch this video several other times and so forth. But I wanted to give you a good idea of what that video was all about. So anyway, we learned from that she did press that button that holds the door open. So apparently she was trying to figure out a way to go either up or down, and the elevator wasn't working for her. It was stuck, and a lot of people thought there may be some paranormal activity going on. But from what we've gathered from the documentary, even, and from all the detectives that were on there, and just the case notes and details, it appears that she pressed that button and it was held open. Her body language was very interesting here, and we're going to talk more about that in the next fact here. Okay, fact 4. These water tanks here on the roof, this is going to be important here in this case. Well, anyway, the water here, we learned that people were complaining, residents were complaining of the water, the pressure, the water pressure was really bad. The color of the water was very disgusting, and the taste. People were brushing their teeth with this water, and they were showering and drinking this water. This ultimately led to the discovery of Elisa, that 19th day. So the next fact here is, that water led to her discovery from those complaints from the residents. So she was found in the water tank, one of these water tanks here, and we'll get into more of the details of how she was found and so forth. But people were drinking and utilizing that water, and she was in that tank. And we'll talk about specifically what that means here as I go to my notes here, which leads to fact 5, right? So we learn at the end of the documentary that the water tank that was opened upon discovery by the maintenance man, okay? The maintenance man had discovered this because he went to go check on the water. And this is when he discovers Elisa face up, and she is naked, and she's floating. So she's face up floating. Now, he reported that the lid was actually open when he first saw it. Okay, this was a huge aspect to the case. A lot of web sleuths out there were they thought, and this was miscommunicated, but a lot of people thought that the lid was shut. Okay, so I want to show you again that picture of it here. There's her in the elevator. So here, the lid was actually open according to the maintenance man, and then he shut it before he contacted police. Okay, but there was some miscommunication where the media had gotten a hold of this information, and there was belief that it was open. So a lot of people thought this death was much more suspicious, and the reality was we just didn't have access to a lot of the facts. A lot of people still do think this death is suspicious, but we're going to talk about what the coroner determined and why, as again, you'll learn through some of that information in the documentary. But that was where she was discovered. Now, police, keep in mind, they had searched all over. They literally did a full in-depth search, checked every door. Could you imagine them going through all those floors in the hotel, every closet, every crawl space, and the one place they didn't look was the water tank, right? They had a helicopter flying over. They had canine dogs. really interesting how she wasn't discovered, but she was not discovered there until 19 days later. So pretty crazy situation with that. Okay, so fact 6, and I'll go more into the autopsy here, but her death was determined to be accidental drowning. Okay, so after they went through everything, again, I mentioned this before, she was face up. Her clothes were also in the tank. That was another interesting thing there. She was naked, but her clothing was inside the tank. Her clothing was not outside of the tank. It was in there with her. And the coroner ultimately believed that she perhaps may have tried to take off some of her clothing to help her in floating. It uses maybe a floating assistant. You can actually build a flotation device using your clothing. I don't know if she was doing that with her state of mind, but her clothing was taken off, and they believed that she was not suicidal, which we'll talk about more as well, but they believed it not to be a homicide. They fully concluded that this was just an accidental death. So we'll get more into that. Matter of fact, as I go down here, let's go to fact 7 here. This was an interesting fact here that I learned, and I really feel bad for this death metal singer. His name is Pablo, went by the nickname Morbid. Okay, Vergara, if I'm saying that right, his last name. But he stayed at the Cecil Hotel, and this was a year before Elisa. And let me change that here for some reason. That was an M. So Elisa, he stayed at the hotel a year before she was actually there. But for some reason, people believed that he was there. They started to accuse him of potentially murdering Elisa, and he was not even at the hotel. He was actually out of the country during the time. And so fact number 7 is dealing with Morbid and the fascination. And you can look at some of these videos, and if you look through the documentary, you'll see that they portrayed him as this possible suspect, when in reality, he, very interesting character, very interesting person, very creative, but very different, right? So a lot of people looked at him as they judged him, and unfortunately, he got to the point where he was getting so many threats and harassment against him that he actually tried to take his own life, and he wound up in a psychiatric hospital. I think one of the more sad things that I learned through that documentary is he mentioned he never went back to singing. He never went back to singing, and kind of lost that part of himself. So it's a pretty sad story there, in which another victim was created out of this the story with Elisa. So I wanted to point that out as another fact in this case. And so let's talk about, we've got 3 more here. Again, I'm giving you some good context here, but definitely watch the documentary. There's a lot more you'll learn from that than these 10 facts that I'm giving you here in this case. Okay, and fact number 8 here. So the coroner believed that her bipolar disorder actually played a big role in this case and what led to that accidental drowning. So they did go through and learn that she was not taking her medications properly. They spoke to family, including her sister, and her sister gave some pretty good insight into Elisa, and that she had gone off her meds before, and she'd gone through these manic episodes where she would act like someone was after her and act very paranoid, and so she was not taking her medication properly. They did find some medication, I think of an antidepressant in her system, but she had mood stabilizers and other medication, antipsychotic, I believe, but she wasn't taking those properly leading up to this event. So when you watch her behavior in the elevator and you watch some of the movements, you can see her body language. It's very bizarre, very, very odd. And a lot of psychologists, a lot of people involved in the documentary believe that she was having a manic episode with bipolar, and was possibly seeing things that weren't there. And when you learn more of the context, that's the thing with these cases, is law enforcement has so much more information than the public, than the general public, and so you don't quite have the full story that you'd like to have, and so you can this can lead to assumptions and other things like that. But law enforcement definitely talked to hotel staff and learned, she was exhibiting odd behavior there as well before her death, and she was with some roommates at one point, and they felt uncomfortable, and so staff actually moved Elisa to her own room. Okay, and then from there, the behavior continued. Okay, investigators believe. So, could she have gotten some help before? Certainly, she certainly could have received help, and this whole tragedy could have been prevented. It was very possible, but we can only look back and say what if. But pretty interesting what they thought about her disorder, and she was very active with this. She was very vocal about her depression or anxiety, and I'll talk about that in the last fact here. But let's talk about fact number 9. Okay, so fact number 9, just want to go into a little bit more detail on the autopsy here. So they certainly went through the toxicology reports, which showed no alcohol or drugs in her system. A lot of people thought that perhaps she may have been on some sort of hallucinogenic drug and was acting very erratic because of that. They didn't find that. They didn't find any, and I put tuberculosis here because there was an interesting theory, because there was apparently some widespread tuberculosis within the Skid Row community, and some people believed online that maybe she was a test case or she was involved in that. Also, to the effect that she was, going to go into the Skid Row society and infect everyone. There's some really weird theories out there about that. But anyway, without going in depth on that, I wanted to mention that they didn't see any sign of tuberculosis in her system, and no sign of trauma. And that's a big thing right there, the trauma thing, because when we go back to, if we're looking at the water tower here, you've got to climb up, those little ladders to get to the water tower. And, if someone were trying to murder her, they'd have to physically drag her up. If she was already subdued or unconscious, they'd have to drag her up. There would be, marks of some sort, abrasions, cuts, scrapes, something on her body. Investigators believe. So they just didn't think that was a very plausible way she could have been killed. And keep in mind, she could have potentially been running and went up that ladder herself, and somebody followed her up there. But again, with all the totality of the facts and everything investigators put together with the lid and all that, they still concluded the accidental drowning based on all the reports. So when we look at that autopsy, that's really important to see everything with the totality of it. So fact 10, last fact here. I appreciate y'all sticking with me this far. If you haven't subscribed, again, consider doing that, and stay tuned for more videos like this. Now, her Tumblr account, that's one other fact I just want to point out, again, because Elisa was very honest and upfront about her depression and anxiety, and she wrote all about that on Tumblr. So you can go onto her Tumblr, and if you can read this name here, I don't know how to pronounce that, but you can see that. You can see all sorts of information about what she was saying, her thoughts. A lot of people in the community, people that have seen the documentary, are reaching out on here because of that documentary. So it's inspired a lot of people to come back on here on the platform, and so if you ever want to take a look at that, you certainly can. Again, tragic story. There's a lot more to it. But I hope you got some good information out of that with those 10 facts. Again, this is Dev with Crime Hive, and I'll be back in another video next week. You all take care.